Why are there no more original ideas in Hollywood? This might sound on the surface hyperbolic or somewhat easily disproved, but it's not hard to understand why it's such a common question when looking at a modern box office dominated by sequels, adaptations, remakes, and reboots. Of course, a reliance on franchise filmmaking is by no means a new concept in the world of cinema. Almost as soon as motion pictures were invented, the potential for serialized storytelling was understood. For instance, as early as 1908, Danish filmmaker Viggo Larsen directed and starred in a series of silent Sherlock Holmes shorts. Most film historians point to 1916's The Fall of a Nation, Thomas Dixon Jr.'s follow-up to 1915's controversial Birth of a Nation, as the first feature-length movie sequel. It didn't take long then for Hollywood to realize not only the benefit of sequels. 1933's Son of Kong was released only 9 months after the classic King Kong, but also long-running franchises, with The Thin Man and its 5 sequels and numerous Charlie Chan movies serving as early examples. And of course, in the 30s and 40s, Universal stumbled into a revolutionary idea, realizing they could not only sequelize their various monster properties such as Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Wolfman, but also cross them over with each other, creating the first shared cinematic universe, an idea very familiar to modern audiences. And yet, while sequels and franchises have long existed, they were only a small part of the overall movie puzzle through most of the medium's history. Much has been written and said about the giant sea change that occurred following the massive successes of Jaws and Star Wars. There's no doubt that, at that point, studios began looking more and more for sure-thing blockbusters, as opposed to the sort of auteur-driven cinema that had recently been far more dominant. But even the emerging blockbuster landscape of the 80s and 90s felt as if it still often allowed for unique standalone films, not attached to any larger series, to break through and enjoy massive success. It's in the 2000s when the pendulum really began to swing the other way, perhaps reaching its natural culmination in 2006, the first year in which every film in the top 10 highest grossers of the year was either a sequel or a movie clearly intended to launch a franchise. There's been no looking back since then. Every subsequent year of the box office dominated by popular franchises, leaving little room at the table for most original standalone films to break through in the same way they once could. From 2010 to 2019, only 4 non-franchise live-action films, Inception, Interstellar, The Martian, and Bohemian Rhapsody, were able to crack the annual top 10. It's no wonder that Ben Fritz, author of The Big Picture, The Fight for the Future of Movies, a book chronicling Hollywood's recent shift to franchise-first filmmaking, refers to modern-day studio heads as primarily brand managers, in contrast to the movie-loving impresarios of yesteryear. And while it's easy to bemoan this shift to franchise domination, it's also entirely understandable. With increasing TV, streaming, and internet options providing more competition than ever before, and with overall theater attendance consistently declining throughout the 21st century, of course studios want to hedge their bets on the surest things possible. This mentality, not surprisingly, has led to a race to develop multiple new franchises that can carry their respective studios for years to come. Some of these attempts have clearly worked. Many more, however, have certainly not. Because while we may live in an era of Hollywood dominated by franchise filmmaking, this does not in turn mean that all franchises are created equal. The movie landscape is littered with failed attempts to create the next Star Wars, Harry Potter, or MCU. This show is a celebration of, or perhaps a memorial for, those attempts. A reminder that even some of the most talented and successful movie makers out there don't always get it right, and that hubris, poor planning, and utterly ridiculous ideas are as much a part of the Hollywood story as accolades and financial reward. This is failure to franchise. 'All right, well, welcome to episode 0 of Failure to Franchise. As that amazing introduction just let you know, this is the name of the show. This is Trev.
I'm Chris.
And we figured it might be a good idea to just start off with this kind of introductory episode to kind of explain what this show is going to be, kind of give some people a sense of it, and also let you get to know us because, we're going to become your new audio best friends over the course of this show. And you always need to have like an introduction to the people who are going to become such a meaningful part of your life. So
your pod buddies,
Yeah.
in your ears for the foreseeable future.
For sure. As a matter of fact, like maybe like you're listening to this. I mean, maybe you're listening to this as the first one, but maybe this is the year like 2026, and we're the dominant podcast force now, right? Like we've beaten Joe Rogan's record. We signed a $2 billion deal with Spotify,
and we have become the franchise.
For sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Everywhere around the globe are opening up F2Fs.
There's been multiple papers written on how ironic it is that our podcast is called Failure Franchise because we were such a successful franchise. Spinoffs, theme park, everything. And you're like, well, geez, I've listened to all these episodes. I love these guys. They're global heroes. I wish there was like more content for them.
They solved COVID.
For sure, yeah. And it's like how that music in Mars Attacks would blow up the Martians' brains on a podcast, just destroyed the coronavirus.
Yeah, we went around town just blaring this episode. Not even episode 1, 2, or 3 where we're going to get to, but just episode 0 of us explaining that we've conquered the world, which is a little weird because we were kind of ahead of the game.
Yeah. But that's the thing is maybe in the future you didn't listen to this one. You dove right into the movies and themselves, and then someone knows, did you know there's a whole episode with just them talking about themselves casually? Now you got a little bonus for yourself. So
yeah, this is called episode Ego. It's all about us. So okay, good.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Well, so we'll in a moment we'll talk about like what the show is going to be, but I figured we just would start with kind of talking about ourselves for a moment. Because it's actually interesting that we're doing a podcast about franchises. First of all, we're doing this because we kind of looked at the podcast landscape and realized what is missing from it is a show with two friends talking about movies.
Yeah, especially bearded, white,
males, straight males, yeah,
straight males.
It's a real like untapped market in the podcast world. So we figured, well, there needs to be another one. But it's interesting that we're doing franchise talk because you and I are only friends because of franchises, essentially, right? A celebration of the biggest franchises ever. Do you want to talk a little bit about our history?
Yeah, absolutely. At this point, did we hit a 6-year friendiversary just recently? Is that what it was? 6 years?
I believe that sounds about right.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember which year that was. Yeah.
So 6-7 years, whatever it was. We ended up meeting at San Diego Comic-Con. We were both waiting. Well, me and my brother and Trev and his group of friends were waiting in line for Hall H. And if anybody has ever been to San Diego Comic-Con, I assume some of our listeners have or know people who have attended. I know conventions are a little bit... maybe we will have to explain it, but at this point. But anyway, you're basically crammed into a room full of 6,000 people to see the biggest stuff, the biggest franchises. The Marvel movies, the Star Wars movies, just everything in between.
Let's make it clear. Not even the movies, just to watch people talk about them for an hour.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's their episode Ego that we listen to.
And exclusive clips that you get really hyped to see, and then everyone gets to see 2 days later.
Sometimes at the same exact moment, people get to see it online. But when you're waiting in line for Hall H, you typically have to wait overnight.
Correct.
So if you're going to Comic-Con, you want to sit in on Saturdays in Hall H, you have to plan for Friday night to chill out on some pavement and live your best life. So, me and my brother got there, and Trev and his friends were there, and it's fun. The best thing about conventions is everybody just is geeking out about the same shit that you like, and it's constant. And we just struck up a conversation, kept talking, and I think we all talked completely straight for the entire, 12 hours plus of waiting. And then it was funny because when people are let into Hall H, you're let in sequence, but let in batches. And, they let in batches, so we all looked at each other and was like, oh, okay, well, you guys are... Well, first of all, I'm Canadian. Trev is American.
American freedom.
And respectfully,
or not so respectfully nowadays. That's fine. I get it.
exactly.
I get it.
Yeah, 100%. Who knows? By this time, Canada might be the dominant player in the world stage. Who knows? But yeah, anyway, so we were like, okay, well, see you, man. Talk to you never, basically. Mm-hmm. And we went in randomly, and it's a kind of a scramble to go find seats. And shockingly, we all kind of met up exactly in the same spots and being like, hey, well, why don't we just sit together? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And we sat in there the entire time.
Yeah, and that was the day we all planned to just be in there the entire day. So we essentially just ended up we we're almost forced into friendship because we spent basically 24 hours together.
I'm still forced in this friendship. I don't know.
Yeah,
what you, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
I'm actually in Trev's basement right now, and I'm locked up.
Like the real defining moment was the overnight element of it is when we ended up the actual spot where we ended up camping most of the night was right next to Dan Blazarian's boat. Remember this?
Oh my God. Yes. And we didn't even know who he was at the time. It was just all these hot chicks and naked and everything on top of this yacht. And there was a helicopter on top, and we were like, what is happening here?
We just kept talking about how amazing it would be to have that kind of boat. And and then you could tell everyone on the boat was looking at this line of comic book movie nerds, ugh, what are you know, it's
all these
disdain.
They're a little sweaty, a little overweight, respectfully.
Mm-hmm.
And then
But yeah, and then we just stayed in touch. And oddly enough, once we started getting the texting going, we've probably talked almost every day since then. So
yeah, it's kind of grown into something pretty cool. It's
we actually went back to Comic-Con together one more time.
Yeah. I visited the States with you guys, and one day when we allow you guys back up here.
No, I will not visit Canada.
Oh, okay.
First of all, I'm not allowed. So
yeah, have we gotten too off the rails for you? Is that what's happening?
I mean, I'm just saying I can't even cross the border right now. So
yeah. We don't want you anyways.
I know that. I understand.
Okay, good. But yeah, no. So a brief-ish history of how we met. But yeah, again, revolving around conventions, revolving around franchises, the love of movies, good, bad, everything in between. We both have the fun thing about us, I think, that we really get along is that we both like a lot of things. I don't think there's just genres that we stick our nose up at. I don't know. I really wouldn't say so. I think we give most things a chance. We give a lot of crap a chance.
Sometimes we revel in it.
Yes, it's yes, absolutely. Yes, revel. That's a good word. Yeah, I like that.
I think I'm slightly more of a crap movie connoisseur than you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But
at the same time, you also flat out love more movies that I think are crap. So it kind of balances out.
Yes, I am. I don't want to say I'm easy to please. That's not what I mean. But I really like big, loud, dumb blockbusters. I don't know. Yeah. There's just something about them. I like having a big TV, big sound, have a beer, have some snacks, and just get lost in some explosions. You know,
like like a First Cow. You know, like you just sit down and
First Cow.
Get the 7.1 kicking in.
There's not okay. It's been a tough year for movies in 2020. But First Cow is definitely going to be my favorite movie of the year, and I cannot wait to watch it time and time and time again. I will never watch that movie in my life, unless you just said
we don't put our nose up at anything. I will never watch First Cow.
And the first lie of the podcast. Yeah, no, not really my cup of tea. Unless I have no idea, but maybe that does set up a sequel and it's going to fail and it'll never happen and we'll have to watch it and then discuss it on this very show. So,
I mean, the title seems to suggest, right? Like, I guess Second Cow and then Third Cow. I see where they're going with this.
And then it turns into a Naked Gun type thing and it's like, First Cow 4.5 or something like that. It just kind of changes up. You know what? I'll wait for that one.
But no, I think you're right. I think there's definitely a lot of interests between us, just even in this realm we're going to be discussing. But the fact that you said yourself that you're kind of, again, not easy to please, but you enjoy all these kind of big blockbuster films. That's why I thought you were the perfect person to go on this journey with me, because this really is a show that's going to be primarily talking about those kind of films.
Yeah.
And especially, this is the thing, like we joke, obviously there are a lot of shows about movies, but most of them, are people kind of just straight out review shows. A lot of them are celebrations of films that people love. Some of them are very particular, like let's look at bad movies and kind of dissect them. What I noticed is there's not a lot of discussion about a lot of the kind of films that kind of get forgotten by time, specifically because they didn't work.
Right.
And there's no realm where that's more kind of apparent than in this world of franchise filmmaking.
Yeah.
As you heard me discuss in the intro to this, and by the way, I hope people like that intro because that was multiple takes. So if people knew the work that went into that.
I wish I was privy for the takes. It was originally, so the original plan was actually every episode will have an intro, and then Trev was going to do it live, like with me here, and we put it together.
Do it live, the Bill O'Reilly special.
Yeah, exactly. And apparently it was hilarious, but I couldn't attend.
I just realized because I wrote out the script for it, and then I just kind of recorded myself doing it just to see what the time was. And I kept tripping over some stuff, and I was like, man, if I do this live, he's going to have to hear me start over so many times. I'll just record it.
Yeah, and I would have quit the podcast, so.
Yeah, for sure. And I wouldn't have blamed you. And you might still. I mean, we'll see how this episode goes. But we wanted to talk about this world of franchises, but specifically the ones that didn't take off. Because you and I, in the last couple of years, we started noticing that we were kind of laughing a lot about random movies we would see or read about or see people discuss on YouTube that all kind of ended the same way. Do you want to talk about that briefly?
Yeah. A lot of YA stuff, a lot of sci-fi starters. They'd want, you get a group of people and they find each other, and one's got a magical power and the other person is, maybe a love interest. There's a will they, won't they, and then at the end of every adventure, at the end of the adventure that we just witnessed, somebody gets the magic glove finally, or the power sword, and they're like, oh man, I cannot wait to go on adventure number 2. And they ride off into the sunset, and that is the last time we ever see those characters again.
Right.
And it
By
is.
the way, I guarantee you some Lionsgate executive is listening right now taking notes. He's like, a magic glove, power sword. We will see if Magic Glove meets Power Sword in theaters next year.
And I actually want that to be the title. Magic Glove meets Power Sword, and that's all.
Yeah.
And then they actually won't meet. That'll be the problem. And
Right. They'll only make a Magic Sword, or Power Glove just never gets made.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like we saw a trend. Like it was, and especially, we joked about that trend, but then when we did do the research and started to list out, however movies we've listed out that fit this category, on the Wikipedia pages or whatever, when they have the plot, it literally is that. Like it's constant.
Yeah, it really got to a point where we just noticed that, and not that we're not breaking any new ground with this discussion,
Sure.
because as I said in the introduction, this is something that people have been very aware of for a while, but it just started to get overwhelming that every single big movie was doing this, right? Like you could just tell, like, no, it's very rare to go see a big blockbuster or even just a mid-level movie at this point that feels like it was meant to be a complete story. Other than like something like a 3 Billboards or something, like obviously those kind of films still. But I mean, I guarantee you, if Hollywood could do
wait, hold on. You never saw 1 or 2. Damn it! You stepped on my joke. Oh man. Anyway, well, we're on the same page. See, this is why we're in the podcast together. We're making the same stupid joke. Anyway.
Yep. But yeah, I mean, the name of the game nowadays is franchises, and I kind of like it. It does make sense, right? So as I said in the intro there, with like things so precarious right now in the movie industry, that's one thing we should say right off the bat, right? This is a show that is going to kind of discuss all these movies that didn't quite work. They didn't launch the franchise they were meant to, but we're not anti this idea necessarily.
No, not at all.
We're not anti-franchise. In fact, we'll talk in a moment about franchises we love and like just our general opinions of like the franchise kind of approach in general.
Yeah.
And I even I do get it, right? Like things are pretty precarious for them right now. And the thing is, you've heard this before, but I mean, the kind of drama that people used to get, the character-based drama that people used to get from movies really has moved primarily over to TV. You have so many streaming options and everything. It makes sense that if I was a studio, you could either try to make a general standalone blockbuster, or you could make something that offers like a 5-year plan, essentially, right? Like, wow, if this takes off, we've got this like set for years ahead of us, you know, and not only the movie, but all the tie-in merchandise, all the spin-offs, all the sequels. So not surprisingly that happens, and we're not necessarily anti that.
And again, it is the film industry. It is a movie business. Like we get it. Like, you know, it's there's people that need to get paid, and it's just, again, not anti this idea whatsoever.
Well, it's just the fact of the matter that movies can't afford to just be movies anymore. You know, they have to be they have to have the potential for a TV show that goes along with it, and video games, toys, theme park attractions, fast food tie-ins. You know, everything. It's got to be comic books and everything. So Hollywood is like so desperate for this to happen that they're just mining every potential IP, looking at every past TV show to see if that could work and turn into the next big thing. And that's really kind of dictated everything in Hollywood over the last few years. And this is not even a show that's going to get into a big discussion about whether that's a positive or negative. We're just going to take a look at all the times it didn't really work.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. So no, I feel you.
And also, to be clear too, it's not only going to be recent things. So we have looked back, and even though this is primarily a more modern filmmaking trend, this desire to start the next Star Wars or MCU, there's certainly failed franchise attempts in the past too. We're going to be looking at those. This is going to kind of cover the gamut, going back to not necessarily the beginning of motion pictures, but certainly when, you know, even in the 70s and 80s, right? They were trying to launch some stuff that didn't work.
We should really talk about A Trip to the Moon, because I really wanted that sequel. I wanted to see where else he went, but
you know, it's interesting. When I was looking at articles about like the history of franchise filmmaking, Trip to the Moon was actually one that was kind of in there as they're talking about like other films he did that seemed similar.
Oh, really?
Whether like, yeah. So you make that joke, but yeah, no, this is something that filmmakers have been thinking about for a long time.
Well, it sounds like I'm brilliant. You chose the right co-host.
Yeah, that's why.
Okay.
So what is it like? What are you? Well, I guess let's talk about what the show will be then, really briefly, and then we'll circle back around and talk about our own kind of history with franchises. But let's just give people a sense of what this will be. So we decided that, you know, this is just, as we said, the introductory episode, but starting with our very next episode, which we will tell you the movie at the end of this one. But every episode will be us looking at a particular movie that was clearly meant to start a franchise and did not, right? For whatever reason, box office failure. Well, it's pretty much going to be box office failure. Let's face it. Like that's ultimately the defining instance. There might be a couple, outliers where something else happened, but that's going to be the primary reason. And then we're going to kind of deconstruct that film. Now, I came up with some kind of rules in terms of like what kind of films can be even part of this, because in talking about this with friends, something that kept coming up is movies that did really well and people just wish there was a sequel. And that's not necessarily what we're talking about. We're talking about movies that were specifically clearly made to kick off a franchise. And so I kind of looked into it, and as long as there's some kind of documented instance of one of the producers or the director or an actor talking about sequels they hope to make, that's where we kind of put our defining line. Most of these are going to be ones that we know were meant to start franchises. It's very well covered at the time, you know.
And it's not like stuff like, okay, I'm going to give an example of something like we won't do. Like I had texted Trev earlier being like, should we do something like On Her Majesty's Secret Service? Because it was one Bond and it was a one-off sort of with the one guy, and then it quote unquote failed. And his response was no, because they still did make sequels, but it just kind of takes place in that universe. So get away from thinking like that. Like these movies
you brought that up, and then I had to push up my Bond nerd glasses and come in and say, actually, no, it's just the fact that George Lazenby quit. The movie wasn't even a failure. It's just that he didn't want to do anymore, and they still did make sequels. He would have been in at least 3 if he hadn't have made that great career choice to not do anymore.
Okay. You convinced me earlier. Okay, you don't have to.
But I'm glad that you brought that up, because there is one caveat here to where the one kind of film we will allow in that so almost everything we're going to look at is basically the first film in a franchise, right? A franchise that didn't happen. But the one instance where we are making an exception are kind of the reboot sequels.
Yep.
that were kind of meant to re-kick off a franchise that's lain dormant for a while. So something like a Tron Legacy or a Superman Returns, which will be 2 films we'll look at. That I'm all for, because that's, again, it's exactly what we're talking about. It was meant to do something and didn't quite do that.
Yeah.
So for each of these films, we've decided to look at them in kind of a 3-prong attack. So every week or every episode when we look at one of these, we will first look at what were they thinking. This will be where we kind of discuss, why did this movie even happen? And in particular, why did it happen the way it did, right? What were the factors that led to this movie being unleashed on the world?
Why were they like, let's take that great photo of all the Universal Monster actors and release it to the world? Why was that? Why did we pick these incredible actors and Johnny Depp? So there you go. Yeah.
So is it like a popular IP? Is it a franchise reboot, like we said? Did they have a particular leading man who is really hot at the moment and they felt like they should build a franchise around him? Yeah. That's what we'll look into and kind of just give the kind of historical context. But then we'll move into, of course, what went wrong. Yeah, this will be where we just... Oh, go ahead.
No, this is just going to be us talking. This is your kind of, I don't want to say standard review section, but definitely what we thought of it. And there's going to be a lot of movies that actually I'll speak for myself definitely, but I have definitely not seen. There's a lot of these I have not seen. So I'm actually really excited that we're going to review them kind of live on the air, so to speak. Like, we kind of have a rule, not a rule of thumb, but definitely a understanding that if when we sit and watch, so-and-so movie, we're not going to discuss it in the interim. We're not until the mics are rolling. So that'll be kind of fun for us and hopefully the listener. So I just didn't want to, waste our comments in a text, so.
Right. And I think the other real fun part of that is, as we said, some of these are going to be movies that it's pretty clear what went wrong. And we're both going to look at them and be like, "Ooh, that's just a stinker," right? Of course totally. This didn't work. And those will be very fun to deconstruct. There will be other ones that we will either kind of maybe be split on, or both just flat out love and kind of be baffled why it didn't catch on. Now, sometimes...
I'm looking at the list right now, and I'm not going to say what they are yet, but, there's some on here that I think are genuinely amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
Movies.
Me too. And, sometimes you then have to, remove yourself from the equation a little bit and be and which we'll try to do and still look at, okay, well, I love it, but why didn't it catch on with, a larger audience?
Totally.
Right? So it'll always be that. It'll be us also figuring out, what didn't work about this. Again, we will probably, in our very first episode, it'll be an opportunity to talk about this, but some films don't work because it's clearly a bad movie, but sometimes other external factors are the cause. Poor marketing, being released at just the wrong time, coming out too close to a similar film.
Yeah, controversies within the actors or producers.
Right. Yeah, so that'll be kind of a deconstruction. And then we'll wrap it up with a look at our third factor, what could have been. And this will be where we'll just kind of speculate an imaginary world, a multiverse, if you will. Where Doctor Strange is gonna get mad at us because we're gonna splinter things off into alternate timelines, where this film did work, and what might it have looked like if a franchise had continued. Yeah. This could take a lot of different approaches, but we might pitch our own sequel ideas. We might talk about which actors we would have liked to have seen join this franchise for whatever reason. We might talk about how, if this had done well, would it have caused a certain subgenre to blow up bigger at a time? Would it have caused other films not to come out later? That's kind of where we'll be looking at that.
Yeah, we'll see where Second Cow would have actually gone, to space, to the ocean. It's undersea. Call James Cameron. Maybe he'll get one off the ground. He likes the water. He likes the pools.
Well, once he's done with the Avatar series in 2042, he can jump into the rest of the first Cow movies.
That's true. That's when we get Avatar 2, right?
Yeah. Okay. We will not be doing Avatar, just because people know, because yes, the sequels are coming. Just be patient.
Yes, and we are excited for them.
Yes, Chris and I are hardcore Avatar defenders.
Yeah, so stop talking shit. We get it. Your jokes are not funny anymore.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got real for a second.
No, I know. I was actually going to say in a moment, I want to just kind of segue into just more about our personalities, but That's too, like, if you want to like get my goat, and like get me riled up, come at me about Avatar or the series finale of Lost. I will
Same
defend
here.
both. To
Yeah. I just literally, I set up a new TV earlier today, and I took a picture to show Trev. And I don't know if you noticed, but in the cabinet is my Lost Blu-rays. Like, I bought that sweet pyramid collection. I don't know if you remember it. And,
I do remember it, and I often regret not getting it.
Yeah. Oh, good. Then I'm going to send you more pictures of it then.
No, I mean, I've come to peace with it, I suppose. But the other thing I regret not getting is, do you remember, like, and you probably have this too, but right, like, after the show ended, DK put out that amazing, like, Lost Encyclopedia, the really big hardcover.
Yes, they did
everything.
do that.
Yeah, did you get that?
No, I never did.
Yeah, I didn't either, and it's of course out of print now, and I've seen it go for a lot on
it's like
various
$1,000 on eBay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, hopefully they'll reboot Lost, and they'll bring that encyclopedia back.
Yeah, and cut the shit about talking shit about Lost, okay? Yeah, that too. Lost, that really is the two for us, eh? Lost and Avatar.
By the way, all you people, you want to come in and be like, oh, Damon Lindelof doesn't know what he's doing, and then he comes back this 1-2 punch of The Leftovers and Watchmen, and now you're all on his groin, and we were there the whole time, so back off.
Mm-hmm. Right? When Avatar 2, what did you say, 2043? In 2043, when Avatar 2 comes out and it makes $6 billion, guess what? We were right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. And he changes history, changes movies again. 3D's back. Anyway.
And it'll be even more impressive that it makes that much, because by that point there will only be 3 theaters in the world.
Yeah, 3 theaters, and you can only have 6 people in at one time. Only matinee showings too.
But the thing is, to rent Avatar 2 on Disney Plus, it'll cost you $85.
Yes, for one-time viewing. $89 for 4K.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything else you wanted to say about the format of the show, or?
I mean, that's why I just like it's just a nice, succinct, 3-pronged approach, I guess. It'll keep us on track. I mean, other than what we just did.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of, it's fun to tell. Again, we're going to what were they thinking, what went wrong, and what could have been, and it'll just be. Hopefully, add a little bit of uniqueness to the film discussion. Honestly, especially that third part. I'm looking forward to. This is another thing I hate is when people rewrite movies. Trev knows that I hate this. When
because I do it all the time.
I know, and it drives me fucking crazy. That was our first. Sorry. Anyway, I'm getting riled up, Trev. Getting riled up. But yeah, I hate when people rewrite movies. And it would have been way better if blah blah blah.
To be fair, I have a master's degree in creative writing, so.
Okay. Wow.
I'm just saying, okay. You can't be surprised when I see a movie and my thoughts start kicking in.
Yeah. I can see your head from Canada. That's crazy. That's crazy. And yeah.
Hey, I'm not saying I've ever written. I'm not saying I've ever written anything good. I'm just saying I find it.
I know you haven't written anything good. I follow your Letterboxd.
Ooh.
Shots fired. Okay.
Shots fired. Sorry, I don't write 1-sentence reviews like a little bit more thought into it.
Hey, nobody's got time for your reviews. Okay.
But no, I feel like, as opposed to you, who's bothered by like the kind of Monday morning quarterbacking, I've always found it just a fun exercise to kind of rewrite things. Yeah.
No, and that will be fun for me because it's something I don't really do, but it is kind of it's going to be an interesting thing to just see like what we wished for what would happen. There's a lot of these movies again that I said that I love, and I've forced on many people. And been like, you gotta watch this, and then they're bummed out that there's no sequel. So, yeah, no, it'll be a good time. I'm looking forward to it. Regardless of our 1 fan, 2 fans, our parents. That's it. So there you go, family.
My mom's not gonna listen to this.
Yeah, my family will definitely not listen to this.
The only way my mom would listen to this is if it was a podcast about like those Lifetime Christmas movies, which are the only movies that matter to my mom.
Those are fun.
Yeah.
She just loves a Lacey Chabert.
Yeah.
Isn't she only in those movies?
I think she is, yeah. Jennifer Love Hewitt, I believe, pops up in those as well. So that's if you're wondering where the Party of Five. Yeah.
The Party of Five reunion.
Where the Party of Five cast went to die. It's Lifetime Christmas movies.
Oh man, that's starting up our second podcast.
So I did want to just briefly talk. So again, so people get to know us a little bit more. I'm a Virgo. No, not that kind of. But What about this, like, so just this idea of like franchise filmmaking in general, right? We already said we're pretty in favor of it.
Yeah.
But when do you think, I mean, so we're slightly different ages as well. I'm just about to turn 40. You're a little younger.
I'm a lot younger.
Okay. Okay. You don't have to put it that way.
No,
But
okay, no, I'm 31.
yeah. So where do you feel like you first, and this is like a weird question because it's not something you often consider, but people always talk about, oh, what's the first movie you remember seeing in the theater, or what were your favorite movies when you were a kid? But where do you remember being really kind of like conscious of like being excited about franchises or just knowing franchises were a thing? Because I might have a slightly different answer than you to this.
That's a great question. I wasn't expecting a question like that. Where did
That's what we call it, gotcha journalism.
Okay. Hire this man. Okay. But I was probably when I got the special edition Star Wars on VHS. I think that's when that was a big moment. And I know everybody says Star Wars is their number one, blah, 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 all that, you know. But getting the VHSs and seeing the episode 4, 5, 6 and knowing the prequels were coming 2 years after that. I think the VHS special editions came out in 97, if I believe.
That sounds right. Yeah.
And I think that's when I was like, oh my God, they're making more of these. And they're going to be before. Really defined my franchise viewing, knowing that there was 3 more coming too. I think that's another thing too. It wasn't just like, oh, we're getting a one before movie, one prequel, one movie that just shows Vader. We're getting a whole other trilogy, and to plan for it and to get excited about it. I think I used to.
Yeah, and you were like, I gotta enjoy these because those will be the final 3. They'll never make any more.
Oh, absolutely. No, I remember that. It's funny because at the end of Revenge of the Sith, spoilers. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I know you haven't seen it. I was in the as the credits rolled. I looked at my brother and said, and I straight up looked at him. I go, "That's it." Little did we know the Pandora's box I would have opened at that moment. But yeah, no, I would say the special edition Star Wars movies, because then it just made me aware of the film, and especially too on those. I don't know, you probably remember, of course, but those VHSs, the start of them had a little behind the scenes special features before DVDs. It was a little like 10 minutes of like the stuff that Lucas had changed and the technology we put in, and I realized I was like, man, this is a fucking business. You know, like there's so much going into these. So I mean, that's my answer. It might be cliched, who knows, but
no, that's what I was curious about, because like, so interesting enough for me, so growing up as like more of a child of the 80s, right? I was certainly aware of Star Wars as a kid. You know, I have an older brother, so in my house a lot of the Star Wars toys were still kind of hanging around, which I stupidly, you know, we both stupidly got rid of. And now I always think like, oh, if I still had that Millennium Falcon, I could be rich, you know?
Yeah, you don't have to do this podcast.
Yeah, but, and actually Return of the Jedi is one of the first movies that my parents took me to see in the theater. I was like 3, you know? But that's the thing, is growing up, Star Wars was kind of done, right? There was no... Totally. As a kid, there was no assumption there'd be any more, you know, other than like, you know, things like the random cartoons or whatever. And even though sequels were obviously always a thing, you know, like there would be something like a Ghostbusters 2 or something, but it always felt like kind of a pleasant surprise when there was a sequel. You didn't go into any movie thinking like, as a kid, didn't watch Ghostbusters and be like, man, I can't wait to see like 4 more of those, right? And then when another one would come along, it was like, oh my God, they made another one of those? That's so cool. I believe for me, the moment I was really aware of this idea of like, oh, a franchise, and probably the most defining blockbuster of my childhood, for sure, and this is true, I think, of anyone my age, is the '89 Batman.
Oh, okay.
A film which I, ironically enough, watched today again for the first time in years, and not even because I was thinking of this, just because I just happened to buy that the Blu-ray 4-pack of the first 4 Batman movies, right. And I was like, I came in the mail today. I was like, all right, I'll watch the first one, but that actually got me thinking about that, about how, oh yeah, so I went and saw this in the theater when I was I can't remember if it was a summer movie, right? So I was actually probably only 8 when it came out. And it's still the only movie to this day that I remember. It was such a big deal that they oversold the theater and people were just sitting in the aisle. They didn't have seats for them.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, you've heard people talk about this. You didn't experience it, but you've certainly heard people talk about how like the marketing juggernaut behind that movie was insane. That's why the theater got oversold, right? You couldn't avoid the hype for Batman that summer. And just the fact that the marketing was all based around basically just that symbol, right? They plastered that symbol everywhere to the point where the hype just got like unbearable. It's one of the few times I also remember going to the theater, and the theater had there was a point of like the concession stand not only sold popcorn, nachos, and pop, but also had Batman T-shirts, posters, comic books, toys.
Oh, wow.
You could buy everything at the theater because a one-stop shop. And it was just so clear going into that you're like, there's not just going to be one of these. They didn't make this to make Batman and stop, right? And even
Right.
as a kid, the way that movie ends, and like he gave us a signal. You're like, you walk out of the theater going, when's the next one? Can I
Absolutely.
see Batman 2 like right now? And that's when I was like first aware that like, oh, sometimes these things are like made to like continue,
That's a good one. I like that. Yeah, I'm not really familiar with. I mean, obviously, Batman '89. Like, I like that movie, but I've never really been familiar with the culture surrounding. I mean, it was really kind of the first big. Well, no, because when was Superman? Superman was in the '70s,
Yeah.
and then
But Batman was bigger than that, like in terms of like a cultural impact.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just like that's where I became aware of how much studios would kind of put into marketing a film, right? Not that when I'm like 8 or 9, I'm thinking of it in those terms,
Right.
but it's where I became very aware of how movies are kind of a business, right? And then only a few years later, you get Jurassic Park, and it's the same thing, where it was like such a big deal, right? That we were all just like so excited for it. And then we're off to the races. But the reason I think this is kind of an interesting discussion is something you and I have recently talked about, and actually one of the things that led to us discussing this show was how still throughout like the 90s at least, that's when you really start to move in. Like for us, we were like loving like summer blockbuster season was always great when I was
Absolutely.
a teenager,
Yeah.
right? Just being so hyped to go see the summer blockbusters. But a lot of those summer blockbusters in the 90s were just kind of standalone films or like original ideas that maybe some of them ended up getting sequels, but they weren't designed that way.
Absolutely.
And you and I have recently talked about, and we've rewatched some of them over this lockdown when we do our movie nights, and just talk about how we kind of miss those days when there's kind of more just, someone had a cool spec script maybe that sold, and they turned that into a summer blockbuster.
Yeah, like the days of a movie like Face Off are
Right.
over. Like it feels like they're over. Just this perfect storm with these gigantic actors and rated R and this stupid concept, crazy action, and we not even a thought of a sequel. I don't think.
No, I mean, if you made Face Off today, that the final scene, I guarantee you that right after John Travolta comes back to his family, there'd be like, they'd go inside, they'd close the door, but then the doorbell would ring and they'd open it up and his like partners would be out there and they're like, we got bad news. They made a copy of your face. And then you cut to like another John Travolta, like in South America killing someone. And then it would slam cut to the credits. And you'd be like, oh man, Face Off 2.
Or it shows that when this John Travolta killing a guy, right? And then he turns to the camera, but then it backs out and then his gang shows up and they're all Travoltas. There's like fucking 10 Travoltas just looking at the camera, ready to go, then cut to black. I like a gang of Travolta.
Yeah. Me, now that I'm saying it, this is not the worst idea. Maybe okay, let's call off this podcast. Let's call Travolta instead, and maybe we should just try to become the writers of Face Off too.
Yeah, I like that. I'm good.
I mean, we watched The Fan. I think Travolta could use Face Off 2 is probably a better idea.
It is weird how he's it's both those actors, Travolta and Nick Cage, have had about 15 years of I have back taxes to pay. But it is funny that both of them did that. So that, again, makes Face Off the perfect storm. So
yeah. The perfect storm. That would probably have a sequel tease today, too.
Oh, absolutely. There's going to be an egg that's going to crack underneath. It's always going to be something like that. Like, an egg cracking and then another storm is born.
By the way, is this... I don't know. I don't think you realize how storms are formed. You think they come from eggs?
Hey, have you seen The Perfect Storm?
No, I have not.
Well, then, you know what? Get back to me.
Okay. Well, thankfully, I don't think I have to watch it for this one. But that's our
George
point, is that
George Clooney fucks a storm. Okay, this is going off the rails. I apologize.
No. Yeah. But where do you I mean, in general, where do you fall though? I mean, we said earlier that we're not anti this new mentality just because from a business perspective we understand it. But do you really miss the days of it not being so franchise dominated, or
I mean, I go back.
Are you okay with it? Have you come to peace with it? How do you feel?
I kind of go back and forth. Like, I get a little. at the end of a movie, I think what bothers me the most is if I'm watching a movie with friends or somebody in the theater and they look at me immediately and say, is there something after the credits? Mm-hmm. And I think that's become a question at almost every goddamn movie out there. I've always sat through the credits, even when I was little. Like, I just liked sitting through I'm a huge, I think we both love orchestral score, and we're a big fan of composers. So I just like chilling and sitting with my thoughts, and then the music.
Also, we're also big fans of key grips, so we like to see who the key grips were.
I personally like Best Boys.
Okay, wow,
grips.
I know.
Grips. Respectfully, but yeah, that's. I like sitting through the credits, but every single movie now. So it's like something like Endgame. When a movie like that culminates, and then at the end, it's like you should be sitting there being like, oh my God, like I just witnessed a decade of something. And then the person next to you turns to you and goes, is there something after the credits? I think that annoys the shit out of me. I think the special has been ripped out, even as special as something like Endgame could be, or even honestly, like I hate Rise of Skywalker, but if even that, like that's the end of something. I do like the idea of something ending, and then but now it's an immediate knee jerk. What's next? And that drives me a little batty. Personally, like again, I like franchises. I like sequels. I like even having another crack at it. You know. Like, if the first movie sucks, the second movie, I will probably still try it out. Maybe they'll get it right. You know, they get the right filming. Look at something like the Suicide Squad. Like, that movie sucks, right? But the Suicide Squad's coming out, and James Gunn's attached. So I'm like, okay. Like, I'm going to be there with bells on. So, to answer your question, I think I've made my peace. But there is a piece of me that does just miss a one-off. That's it.
Yeah, you kind of have no choice but to make your peace now. But also, like you tied into something where that's like the real danger of franchises too, right? I mean, like so one great thing about franchises, there is a comfort to it, right? Of something like the MCU just being like, oh man, I like these movies. They're going to keep doing them, right?
Right.
And maybe that's an odd example because so far they haven't like. I don't know if other people agree, but the MCU hasn't like completely biffed it yet, right? There's definitely some I don't like, but there hasn't been anything embarrassing yet.
Yeah.
But even when there's like kind of a comfort of franchises, what is kind of dangerous about them is that a really poor conclusion to a franchise or like a really bad installment can be heartbreaking and hard to take in a way that just a bad standalone never is, right? Like, if you see a bad standalone film, you're just kind of like, whatever. But, like, I'm in the same camp as you of, like, really, really disliking Rise of Skywalker. And coming off of liking Force Awakens and loving Last Jedi. Yeah, that's right. We're also those guys, people. We love The Last Jedi. We're social justice warrior cucks, whatever you want to say. But then to be so disappointed in how it all wrapped up, you know, that's like a kind of way... When now all these franchises start, right, you're always kind of apprehensive about, are they actually going to stick the landing? And that puts like this like extra layer of pressure on everything you see now.
It's weird because movies have become TV shows, and this isn't going to be a TV podcast, by the way. If anybody's, we're not going to talk TV much, really at all. But for analogy's sake, film has become TV, and I have a hard time starting shows now. Because of the way, like, it's just a commitment, right? Like, it's a commitment. And so, like, all of a sudden now a franchise comes, you know, it's even starting to wear on me. I love the MCU, but when they announce their big, you know, 5-year plan, all I'm thinking is, like, am I going to be alive in 5 years? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like there's so much going through my head. Like, I don't know where the hell I'm going to be in 5 years. So when I have the possibility of seeing, you know, Blade, like what happened to that movie? So the MCU, even as a franchise, is kind of, it's draining, I think. Like, and again, sticking the landing. Are they going to get there? What if Endgame was supposed to come out in 2020?
I know.
Like, that's crazy.
I know. I've thought about that a lot. Can you imagine if that was the movie that was delayed right now? How insane people would be going.
Yeah. Like, thankfully, we're just being delayed for what?
Black Widow and
Shang-Chi, like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, it's I'm sure they'll be good. But if Endgame was the culmination, and then we had to sit on like we had to avoid spoilers. Oh my god! And then watch it for $85 on Disney Plus as an add-on.
Yeah. That's the other interesting thing about franchise you brought up, where you said where you made the joke about whether you're going to be alive in 5 years, and this is like, again, there's something kind of comforting about this, but also odd. So like another, like I love the James Bond series, right?
Right.
And I love the James Bond series because my dad loved the James Bond series. And I got into it through him. He took me to see the Timothy Dalton movies when I was very young. Then we went and saw the Pierce Brosnan ones together. And then I remember by the time Casino Royale came out, it was more like I was going to see movies a little more with my friends and not so much my parents.
Sure.
But I remember I couldn't wait for, like, I saw it the first weekend. I think he saw it like a little later, and I couldn't wait to hear what he thought of Daniel Craig. It just was like this very like bonding thing. And then my father passed away before Skyfall came out. And I just remember thinking like, oh, that's kind of like, this is going to be the first James Bond movie that my dad doesn't see. And then I realized, oh man, there's going to be James Bond movies I don't see.
Right. And
that's such a weird thing. And actually, I was looking when I was doing some research for this, I saw an interesting quote from Adam Rogers in Wired Magazine, who said the same thing, where he's like, you won't live to see the final Star Wars movie, which is true now, right?
Absolutely.
And it's just so weird to like be like, oh, there's no finality to these things anymore, right? I mean, some of them are, but like these really, really popular things, right? You don't get to see the ultimate culmination because there isn't one. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if that's a positive or a negative. I think there's something kind of cool about the fact that these things just live on beyond us, but it's also kind of, when you're really into something, it's kind of sad to think like at some point I'm probably going to kick the bucket or something's going to happen where the next installment I'm not going to get to experience.
Well, it's kind of like 2019 was a big year for things, quote unquote, ending. Again, Endgame, Rise of Skywalker, and Game of Thrones. And I remember joking for a year plus before, being like, I just got to survive to the end of 2019 because I gotta watch these movies. This feels like, again, the end. But you're so right. It's not. We're just gonna get a new Rey and a new reboot. We're gonna get, hopefully not a new Game of Thrones. Oh yeah, we hate Game of Thrones, the ending. So don't come at us on that too. No. But you're right. Yeah, there's something special about living in the moment, in the time period that, oh man, I was around when Endgame came out. But I might not be around for Avengers 23. So, but again, that's that generation's movie. It's a weird, we've got a little philosophical here, Trev, thinking about our time in the universe. I like it. I
mean, why not? I was just thinking about, where you said you were so determined to survive 2019. Do you think the universe was like, all right, this is like a monkey's paw situation, right?
Absolutely.
Because now 2020 is really trying to get rid of you.
Oh,
get rid
100%.
of all of us.
That's exactly what happened. There was too many things that were riding in 2019, and then when 2 out of 3 biffed it, it was over.
So since we'll be talking a lot about like the franchises that didn't quite work, and I'm sure a lot of them will be, not the best movies in the world, but to again sell the idea that we're not like anti-franchise, and in fact we're going to celebrate the idea of them often and talk about why it's a shame some of these franchises didn't happen. I did think it was worth asking, what are some of your like favorite franchises? What are the ones that you kind of gravitate to? What would you like? What are your, like the general fandoms you would say you're a big part of? Just so people get like a baseline of who we are.
Other than I think the cliche Star Wars and Marvel, I think we're both of that. And I don't even want to say cliche, but you know what I mean. Everybody seems to like those movies. I know I love the Transformers movies.
In case if you were wondering earlier if he was telling the truth when he said that he's easy to please.
Yes, I love that first movie. I think that movie hit me the summer of 2007. I was 18, and it just hit me at the perfect time in my life that I was like, fuck yeah, hot cars, hot girls, explosions, summer, California. I was like, man, being 18 is awesome. And I think it just kind of grew with me. I know those movies get progressive. Well, actually, they don't. One of them gets good, but then they all get really bad. But I don't know. I love big fantasy franchises. I think I want to be sitting in worlds like that. That's why maybe I gravitate to the blockbusters and stuff, because they become very just fun. Like the worlds seem fun, like Lord of the Rings. I want to live in like that world seems awesome. Stuff like that with magic. I want franchises to be not here. Or if they're here, big giant robots are here from space. I like franchises like that. I'm not a big fan of comedy sequels or comedy franchises. There's a lot of them that I do like. Like I'm a huge Austin Powers fan. But I think that's more. I think that comes down to more actors than anything else. But yeah, comedy franchises I'm not a huge fan of. But big blockbuster sci-fi fantasy franchise, because I just want I when that movie ends, I want to go back to Middle Earth. You know what I mean? I want to go. I want that. I want to see even the Harry Potter. Like, give me a wand. I want to do some spells, like stuff like that. I want to go to Hogwarts again. I want to check them out. It's just if you give me a big fun world that lets me disassociate from the pressures of real life, I would always want to revisit that. If that answers your question. Yeah.
It does. I just feel like quickly coming in with a public service announcement, though, that just because you said that you wish to live in Harry Potter does not mean that we support J.K. Rowling, because we definitely do not.
Well, I guess I'm maybe rethinking my fandom at this point.
Yeah. No. Down with Rowling for sure. Yeah. She's a bad person.
She should probably just stop tweeting.
She needs to stop. At least tweeting, but
at least bare minimum. Just put the phone.
I was
down.
just going to say she just needs to stop. Just stop everything. She needs to stop having her terrible views too. But yeah, no. So we're certainly going to talk more. Like the franchise world, it definitely exists more in that realm. Right. I'm a huge, as you know, I'm a huge horror nut. Totally. So, we're not gonna. There are some horror films we'll talk about in this, but it's not gonna be as consistent.
But weirdly, the horror films get a huge. They usually get a huge franchise.
That's what I was just about to say. Like that's the thing. I was actually just about to make that point. So again, this is where we're sharing a brain already.
I like it.
Horror, it seems like horror. It's very easy to get a franchise going.
They're immune. They're immune to failing in a weird way.
And in fact, my all-time favorite franchise is Friday the 13th. Which I just love.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, that's my all-time favorite franchise.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's interesting because I was thinking about like the franchises I love, and again, so I would say MCU is probably my second favorite.
Right.
Which again, that, like you said, that's fairly generic. And it's simply because, and I am in that point of like many other people, kind of feeling a little tired of it now, and maybe that's just because Endgame was such a satisfying finale. I was actually feeling pretty checked out before Endgame, and I was so happy that one was so good to kind of bring the love back when it needed to be, right?
Absolutely.
But also I'm a huge comic book guy. So like for me, MCU is like, and I, being older, I remember growing up, and other than like things like, there was Batman, but then there was also movies like some of these we'll talk about here, movies like Steel and, Catwoman. There was still like this idea that comic book movies usually aren't that good. And so as someone who loves superheroes and loves comic books, seeing the MCU actually deliver on the promise of what I thought as a kid they could be, that's why that franchise is great. But Friday the 13th, and even Star Wars to me, which is a franchise I love, but I've always been a little like kind of iffy on it, because this is actually like something my friend used to say, but I really latched onto it because we had an annual event that we'd call Blue Harvest Fest, where we would watch all the Star Wars movies starting like 6 a.m. And we were always like miserable during the prequels because we don't like them very much. And then we watched the holiday special and we'd be miserable during that. But my buddy said, he's like, the great thing about Star Wars is that it's awesome when it's really good, and somehow it's even better when it's bad, because it's just so fun, right? It's so funny to like be like, what are they thinking, And I'm hoping like at some point, like that's what even Rise of Skywalker will become for me, where like there will be less anger watching it, more just like, I can't believe they made all these decisions.
Yeah.
And then Friday the 13th also is a very inconsistent franchise, because even though it was made to be a franchise, they were never planning anything. And they would quickly rush another sequel out and bring in different writers and a new filmmaker. And so you have this like really sloppy continuity. You have entries where he ends up going to Manhattan, where he goes to space. There's suddenly like, oh, we don't know what to do. Let's bring in like, they were like, let's have him fight Carrie. And they're like, we can't get the rights to Carrie. We'll just make up another psychic girl. So I kind of love the sloppiness of it. And then I love the inconsistency of Star Wars.
Right.
So that's another thing about franchises that can be interesting is like sometimes they're almost better to me when they're like inconsistent a little bit, because I think it makes them more interesting, right? Because we're just somehow like the reason I'm kind of bored of MCU is because it's just kind of been consistently good. And I know it's a dumb thing to say, but consistently good, but rarely great, right?
Totally. It's become a well-oiled machine that you can always rely on. But few and far between are you getting the Winter Soldiers and the Guardians of the Galaxies anymore.
Yeah. And then, as I said earlier, I'm also a big Bond fan, and that's like another one where I mean, I've already lived through what in my time 3 Bonds, you know.
Because you're what 68 years old?
69.
Oh, nice, got him.
Yep. Come on, how did you know? Wait, but that's kind of the joy of that franchise too, right? The excitement of always like getting a new Bond and thinking what the new direction is going to be, and the speculation of who it will be.
Mm-hmm. No, it's gonna be fun. Like even seeing what's gonna happen here with if No Time to Die ever comes out.
Right. Yeah.
We could have actually witnessed the last Bond.
Yeah. There's like no like streaming service to dump that one onto, is there?
No, I don't think so.
Disney will own James Bond by the end of the decade, probably.
They'll just cut out all the gunshots, all the violence, all the sex, They'll cut out Daniel Craig's little swimsuit scene. Yeah.
No. Every one will be 20 minutes long now.
Yeah.
But it'll allow him to cross over with other Disney characters. So Bond meets Mr. Boogedy coming 2024.
That's when they get Robert Downey Jr. back.
So do we want to wrap this up by kind of previewing what's to come a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to just they kind of get the gist of the types of movies we're going to talk about. But do you want to say what our first episode will be?
Yeah, for sure. So when we come back with our official episode number 1, I think we picked a real doozy and a real appropriate one to start this with, because I don't think in recent memory there's a better example of everything we were just talking about, right? A film that was so clearly designed to launch a franchise, and yet so many things went wrong, and it still stands as, in recent memory, one of the most kind of embarrassing, public failures and a look at like Hollywood hubris. And that's not a review of the film. We'll talk about it next time. But we're saying that's kind of what happened, and that is Disney's John Carter will be our first episode,
which I'm really looking forward to. I have not seen it since theaters in 2012, so I'm really looking forward to. I remember. Well, I won't tell you what I thought of it, but I'm looking forward to revisiting it, especially with a fine-tooth comb, so to speak.
Yeah, so if you want to like watch along with us or watch the movies before we do our episodes, that's your homework is John Carter. And then kind of moving on, our second episode will be a look at another recent kind of fallen on its face franchise attempt, and that is the 2016 Ghostbusters.
Yeah, and again, that falls in line with our rule about a reboot to jumpstart the franchise into a new direction with a new creative team, a new everything. And we'll talk about that one.
Which was such a failure that they rebooted the franchise again just a couple years later, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right. That's coming out. Time is in
a non-COVID world, we would have already seen that.
Yeah, and it probably would have failed. But we are also, we didn't mention, these are going to be bi-weekly. Yep. So 2 movies a month, basically. Yep. So again, if you want to follow along, we wanted to make it easy for you, the listener. Also easy on us.
We wanted to make it easy for us. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, that's it's for us. But yeah, so we actually have our first 4 locked in. So yeah, John Carter, Ghostbusters 2016. And then we're going to actually go back in time a little bit. And we're going to revisit Waterworld from 1995. A movie I had just recently seen, I think like 5-6 years ago. So that is famous for it. We'll probably
another infamous bomb. Yeah.
So much so, I think they're still paying for it. Also, then after that, we're just gonna go a little bit further back in the 90s with Super Mario Brothers, 1993. So, if this gives you a glimpse into our eclectic I guess, filmography of what we're going to talk about. It's not going to be just comic book movies. It's not going to just be these fantasy movies. It's everything in between everything. So it just there's just going to be a lot of variety, I think, on the show, which is going to be
I mean, we can even just say, like, we have if you're worried, like, how long could this possibly last? Like, maybe you're wondering, right? Like, how many times has this happened? Don't worry. We've already got a document of 145 movies, right?
Yeah.
So we're
and
good.
counting, and counting.
And counting, because we keep thinking of more, and they're going to make more while we're doing this, for sure.
There's potentially a couple that came out this year that might be on the list.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
And I won't read like the whole list or anything right now. And we don't, beyond the first 4, we don't know where these are going to fall. We haven't had it planned. But just to throw out some other titles, just to show the kind of variety, because as you said, obviously we've got some comic book non-starters on there, right? As we will of course be looking at Ryan Reynolds' Green Lantern film. Yeah. We'll of course be looking at Halle Berry as Catwoman, but we'll also be looking at kind of really forgotten ones like R.I.P.D.
Yeah.
Going back in the past again, looking at, previous Disney attempts at franchises like Dick Tracy and The Rocketeer.
Yeah.
And
Wing Commander's in there.
For sure, Wing Commander. Even films like, like something like SWAT from the early 2000s when they tried to take an old TV show and get that franchise going again. Or something like Alex Cross, kind of trying to reboot that franchise with Tyler Perry.
Both Street Fighter attempts.
Yeah, we've got 2 of those. We got a couple Robin Hoods to look at.
Yep. That's my favorite when they tried and then tried again, and it's not working, man.
Yep. Yeah, but it's a good mix. I'm just looking again, like
Totally.
just to throw out a couple more titles. Even something like The Lincoln Lawyer, which people might forget.
I swear, I was just about to say Sahara.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That both Matthew McConaughey movies. That was just okay. All right.
The dude still doesn't have a franchise. That's interesting. And he's avoided like franchise world, but not for lack of trying. At least twice.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. A couple. We got a couple Hercules movies on here. I'm thinking of other movies like. Do you guys remember The Losers? You probably don't, but don't worry, we'll talk about it. And then, needless to say, if there's going to be like one like little subgenre that we're going to kind of come back to a lot. Don't worry, we have multiple attempted YA adaptation franchises. Oh, yes. Because in the wake of Twilight and Hunger Games, Hollywood was thirsty for new YA franchises. And not many of them worked.
Yeah, guess what? They mostly failed. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. We have our work cut out for us, I think. And again, if you want to follow along, we'll always announce what we're going to review next week. We should also briefly mention that occasionally, not super often, but we also do occasional bonus episodes where we will look at failed TV pilots. So you mentioned earlier that this is not a TV podcast, but every once in a while we'll allow ourselves to deviate into it because don't forget the same kind of dumb execs making these decisions for movies are often working in the TV realm too. For sure.
And I think there's something interesting to look at something like David E. Kelly's attempted Wonder Woman show. Or something like we found out we recently saw a pilot for Not Another Teen Show, the attempt to take another teen movie and turn it into a weekly series. And so I think it's interesting to look at unsold pilots and as in the same regard.
One of my favorites is actually just seeing the casts and like what the cast, what would they have been known for. So very interesting all around. This might be torturous, but we will get through it.
Torturous for us
together.
Probably even more torturous for you, the audience, but we hope not.
Yes.
If you could put up with this one, which was very kind of, just loosey-goosey, don't worry. We'll be back with a little bit more of a format to work with and a very interesting movie to talk about, no matter how you feel about it. I think John Carter is a super interesting film to dissect in terms of this kind of conversation.
Yeah. So don't forget to, if you like this, please subscribe to us.
Subscribe. The whole drill. Subscribe. Leave reviews if possible.
Yeah, that'd be cool. We're
the new kids on the block. Let's see if we can.
We're coming for you, Rogan.
That's right.
Put your money where your mouth is. Anyway, okay. Thanks for listening.
Thanks. See you next time.